As we're coming up to the end of the publication of my book, Puzzling People, which will be no longer available as the contract with the publisher runs out in March, I think now is a good time to do a reprise of the videos that I started making back in 2010 on the subject. And some of my opinions have changed, some of my opinions have copper fastened even stronger. I'm definitely less trusting of people than I used to be. And one thing I've definitely, and I've still got mad hair, but one thing that I'm definitely very different about now compared to back then is I do believe that people who become obsessed with psychopaths, and I'm talking about the ones who have their forums and all they do is talk about that and nothing else, they become the monsters that they claim to hate. Just like Nietzsche and Carl Jung told us, you can go to any of these so-called recovery forums, and what you see are festivals of hate. The sheer toxic energy that comes off them. They're not helping people. They're probably, some of them are extremely dangerous, in fact, because they have this incredibly paranoid cult-like mindset that basically everyone is a psychopath by default. They discard people's humanity, and the mods have set themselves up as like popes and cardinals and pontiffs who sit there judging who is worthy of being allowed to be a human being according to the criteria that they've invented. And that entire criteria that they've invented for rating psychopathy is based on nothing else than what pissed them off about the person who dared to dump them. And that's what makes these people extremely dangerous. They don't understand, and they don't want to understand, because they've a vested interest in trapping people into this world of there's psychopaths and there's just wonderful people. There's no such thing as an arsehole or a wanker in these people's worldview. They go straight from 0 to 100, and these are sick fanatic people, and they are like that because they've been infected. That's why they attract like bunny boilers and serial false accusers and these kinds of disturbed people. These are people who are so have went into hell and became hell. Where from day one, I've always said you should never go around calling a person this unless you really, really have some, really serious stuff that you could probably stick them under an fMRI machine and probably get the brain pattern scan showing that they are. Otherwise, you must always give a human being the benefit of the doubt. Now, this video is concerned with gaslighting. When I made the original gaslighting video, I think it was like 5 years ago now, that no one really heard of the term. Now it's a term in common usage. I wasn't the only one putting it out there. Lots of people were, but I think I played a part in making people understand the concept. I've done some very good interviews on it, specifically a one with James Corbett, which I'll post a link down to below. And gaslighting is very important. Now, looking back on this 5 years later, has anything changed in my opinion of gaslighting? No, it hasn't. I think it's one of the things that I actually think has only become more and more real. That this phenomenon of gaslighting is a very important subject we've got to learn. Now, I'd like to give you an idea of gaslighting, an example of someone gaslighting. That's a very powerful and not very commonly, but it wasn't maybe in the past. And you don't hear it so much these days. And that's the concept of a man who beats his woman and then says, "It's not my fault. I saw my father beat my mother when I was a little boy, and I think it's normal." Now, this is clearly gaslighting, and it's clearly a lie. And any man who says this should not be allowed the benefit of the doubt that he's really a good person inside. Because what happened there is he, if he really was affected by seeing his father beating his mother, seeing the bruises on her face, making up all these excuses to her sister that she walked into a door, seeing her being dragged to a women's shelter at 4 a.m. on a Saturday night when he comes home in a rage and all this kind of thing, he would have empathy for his mother. he would actually be put himself in that position. He would see her suffering, see her crying, see the look of terror in her face when she's cowering. I've told people that really weird story in the tower block of flats that I grew up in. That one day I was walking, one of the most horrifying things I'd seen as an early, like I don't know, about 9 at the time, maybe younger, I'd seen of this guy who was beating, he was drunk, and he was a youngish guy, I'd say he was in his 30s, and he was beating his wife on the stairs. And the neighbors were trying to get him off, and he was screaming at the top of his voice, something that only a psychopathic mind could come out with in a situation like that. And he was going, "You fucking destroyed me, you bitch. I could have been the next Gene Pitney." And I always remember how surreal and strange that whole experience was. He didn't care. That's all. We were getting an insight that somehow he thought that she had destroyed his greatness. Now, back to the subject of the guy who says, "My dad beat my mother as a kid, and therefore I don't know any better." Well, if he had any kind of compassion in his soul, he would know it was an incredibly wrong thing to do to his own woman. Because did he not did he not suffer for his mother's pain? Did he not, project himself into that? No, he just wants to beat his woman. And 9 times out of 10, you'll find that probably 99 times out of 100, the fellas who are slapping their women around and saying things like, "It's not my fault. I saw my father do this to my mother when I was young." Chances are it never happened. It's a lie. Their father probably never laid a finger on their mothers. If they did, they wouldn't be like that. It's very similar to the idea of the fellas who go to war. They don't come back and they never talk about it. Where ones who are all like, "I'm lock and load, I'm a big shot hero," and all this, obsessed with Vietnam movies, they've never been anywhere near a war because they'd be the first one crying for their mothers. But this is the thing. This is the gaslighting. So he's somehow beating his wife up, right? And then he's twisting it around to make it sound like it's somehow she's deserving of being slapped around because she has not understood his past trauma. This is inexcusable. This is only a crazed psychologist or psychiatrist could actually use that as a defense, or a lawyer to bring that into court as a defense. It's just not there. If you see the suffering of another human being, it just gets into you. It just gets into you. Now, and if it was your mother, it's even worse. What a horrible thing for a child to experience. You're certainly not going to do it to your own woman if you love her. So that's one of the greatest examples of gaslighting ever. The changing of reality, so the abuser makes it look like he's the real victim here. And we get this a lot in sort of like what they call progressive liberalism, where the idea that the victim is the ultimate. There's no excuse. I don't care how many times your village was bombed in Syria. You have no right to go to Paris or somewhere else and kill an innocent human being that had nothing to do with it. This is the same gaslighting. We had a situation recently in in Sweden, where a woman was raped by a Muslim refugee, and then she dropped the charges because she felt sorry for him. She has been gaslighted by this idea that somehow the victim is the abuser, and that's a classic one. The ones who say, "I beat my woman because I watched my father do that to my mother." That is a classic example of gaslighting. And gaslighting is one issue I've covered which I feel stronger about than ever.